Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Laura Adams. Looking forward to our conversation today, Laura.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, Simon.
The honour is all mine. So, Laura and I were swapping emails in the summer, and she's a busy lady, so it was scheduled quite a long way out. But we actually met very briefly in Florida, didn't we, as well, at the
Yes.
Families Rising conference in Florida. So, ladies and gentlemen, Laura is adoptive mum. She has two, which she has, her and her husband have four daughters. The two older ones are bio kids, and the two younger ones, who are 19 and 20, were adopted from China. When they were two, three, the youngest one was adopted at two. How old was
Yeah,
your?
the first one we got through really just their formal program that they have set
Yeah,
up. She was about a year.
she
And
was.
then the second one, about 2.5 years later, we first system was sort of shutting down a little bit. And we heard about the special need waiting list and we said, oh, we're going to do that. So yeah, we got our youngest that way.
Yeah,
And she
and
was two.
when she was
Mhm.
two. And she's also the founder and president of I Care for Adoptive Families and Foster
Yeah.
Families. I Care for
Yeah. So
what?
it's
Yeah,
I care for adoptive and foster families.
correct.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I'm stumbling over that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We love this the richness of this experience, right? The lived experience of being a mom through adoption, and also the depth that the professional experience
Mhm.
brings to you as well. So looking forward to a great conversation. So the question I love to start with is what does thriving mean to you, Laura?
So thriving means to me really that you're understood and well supported. We can't take away really challenges, that can come our way in life, but we can get through those challenges and we can, overcome them and come to, a place of healing and understanding and moving forward in life, having hope in life when you're seen and understood. And we sometimes find that that is the gap in this experience that, you and I, people who've gone through it for a number of years, we come to this realization and we can, get the right help and move forward. But for those that don't, we see a huge gap. And thriving is different for everyone, right? I mean, we want positive outcomes. We want kids to be emotionally well. We want kids to be able to move forward in their careers and in their own families. But what that specific thing looks like for each one, of course, that would be different. But
Yeah.
if I had a bucket list of where I wanted, all those things I really want for our kids.
Yes. Yeah. And you're professional. You do some work with as a speaker, right? So with professionals, social
And
workers and
training.
educators and
Yes,
trainers.
yes. So
And
we,
and it's
mhm.
connected we thrive is I think is that's the name of the your flagship program, right?
Right,
Yeah.
you got it. That's our professional training series, professional development for schools, and very broadly from we want from the teacher in the classroom to the person in the cafeteria, all the way to the counselor office to be able to understand what an adopted child goes through and what their journey is.
Yeah. So why did you pick this Thrive name as part of your flagship program then?
Well, I think a lot of times systems are focused on, numbers, right? Like the outcome of, you can look at the child welfare system and they'll talk about how many kids dropped out, how many kids maybe, went into juvenile justice. And there's these really, the focus is on the challenges and the issues. And we're not so focused on the wonderful things that can happen and how to do that. And so Connected We Thrive really answers both of those. Connected, meaning we want all systems to be educated and know how to support and work together for thriving. So our whole series is very hope focused and very positive.
Yeah. So this is a specialist area that we don't come across very often on the podcast, right? The support of school systems. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in this area because it's so rare. There's so few people doing it. I think I've
Mhm.
had one guest on in the past that's in this
I know.
space out of whatever 610, 620 episodes that we've done. It's a very specialized space. So if you are interested in this area, then get in touch. And I think because one of the challenges that adoptive parents talk to me about and talk to others about is this advocacy piece. And the fact that the schools are set up for the majority, and
Mhm.
adoptees or foster kids are a minority, and they don't really. Sometimes they don't have the necessary flexibility, and adoptive parents can feel like they're tearing the hair out, right? Trying to get the system to, to tailor itself to their kids' needs, which are different given the background. So this advocacy space and changing changing systems from within, I think, is really really important.
Yeah, and you hit on a couple of things there. So often the responsibility of training everyone who comes in contact with, the adopted child is put on the back of the parents. And they're already, like you said, working with maybe some behaviors and emotions that they might be struggling with. They might be reaching out to other professionals, medical, mental health, and trying to, get everyone on the same page is really, really difficult for them, who are also trying to just be a mom and dad and raise the child. So, really, we're hoping that by getting school systems trained where kids spend 40 hours a week, that will help remove some of that weight from parents and really empower the schools to know, right? Schools can't be expected to understand something that they've never been taught, just like all of us. So we know that that is the big missing gap in schools. The big push is to have schools trauma informed, but trauma informed, a lot of the training does not cover this set of kids at all. Relational loss, displacement from home, what that does to your psyche, the fact that kids it shapes their outlook of themselves, their outlook of others, their outlook of the world. And that psychological piece is not understood by schools because it's really not given to them.
Yeah. So the teachers aren't being intentionally obstinate. They just don't know what they don't know.
100%, 100%. Yeah. In fact, and so when we first started a couple of years ago, and would reach out to schools, we started asking schools to take there's a free mental health training program that's accredited by the Center for Adoption Support and Education in Maryland. And they have this free program online. Anyone can sign up. It's asynchronous, but it's 17 and a half hours. It's designed for mental health professionals. And we know that teachers aren't probably going to take the 17-hour training. And yet the kids are in their classroom and they're doing assignments that might involve families. They might be doing stories that involve families. And there's a lot of triggers during the school day, when you have a substitute teacher come in, when there's transitions. There's a whole host of things that really, if teachers knew about and understood better, they would understand the why behind the behaviors and emotions that they're seeing. So we decided then to form this Connected We Thrive professional development, which would be much shorter for them to be able to just get the fundamentals, the foundational information. And then we also, our signature program is this connection kit, which we provide schools with the actual tangible tools, different assignment options, visuals for regulating breathing and calming. We have just a lot of things in there that can help a teacher in their everyday practice. So that way they could kind of say, okay, it's not just intangible. We're not just talking about, oh, let's talk about this idea. We're saying, no, we can take what we're learning and we can actually put it into place in use in the classroom.
Yeah.
And we're hoping through, this outreach, providing kits, that we can start raising awareness about this issue. And you're right, be able to get more schools interested in taking the training.
Yeah. So if you've got a parent, if you've got a kid in school in the US, then you really should be encouraging that school to check out the the things that Laura's talking about here. So there's a link in the show notes. So I want to take you back a little bit to this
Mhm.
idea of support. You took
Mhm.
when I was asking you about thriving, you talked about some people moving forward and seeking support, and whereas some people not doing that, right? Some people
Mhm.
hesitating or freezing rather than taking forward. What is that? That's my kind of recollection of what you said. Is that about right, Laura?
Well, I think what happens is not so much even that they might not seek help. Sometimes the help that they seek doesn't see it through this lens either, right? I mean, you can have professionals, actually in social work grad schools now, there really isn't much on this at all. And there's certainly not a path for adoption competency right now in social work grad schools. So they can miss or they can support it in a different way. So as a support group leader, I see a lot of families come to us whose kids have been diagnosed with ADHD, ODD, different diagnoses that might accurately describe the symptoms that they see, but that's not the actual diagnosis. It might be more related to this trauma experience. And this might be a quite normal reaction or behavior for that child for the developmental stage that they're going through as they process the trauma. And why we want schools to know it and even parents to know it, because quite honestly, Simon, parents don't know this information
No.
either. That these are normal reactions to their loss, and that through better support and understanding and collaboration, we can get the child through that stage and not label them with a diagnosis that might be incorrect and that would last potentially throughout their adolescence and even into adulthood. We see, people medicated and just not supported in the right
Yeah.
way. So I feel like parents are looking for help. People are looking for help, but the help isn't quite there yet.
Right. Okay. So we often talk about this show that some diagnoses are completely missed, like FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome disease.
Mhm.
That is missed. But you're also talking about some trauma issues, adoption related trauma issues being misdiagnosed because the social workers haven't had sufficient depth in their training
Yeah.
to recognize this. And again, I guess it comes back to it being a minority thing, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
the number is,
Although when that'll be sometimes the first reaction, like if I'm talking to a school or a district, they might say, well, we don't have very many of those kids, foster kids, right? But when they're looking at the numbers, they're looking at those that are under a formal umbrella of the DCFS system, and not so much the fact that there can be other kids living with relatives or other people on an informal basis, and those numbers are not captured under the system. Also, adoptees are not tracked in a school. So when you go to register in the United States, there's boxes to check, and one of them is, are you a divorced parent or family, and who does the child live with? But there's not a box to check to say, how has your family been formed, or has your child experienced foster care placements? None of that. So literally, our kids are hidden. And we did a deep dive into Illinois' numbers, and really, we estimate the correct number to be about 15% of the school population, which is like three in every classroom.
Yeah.
So that's important for a teacher to
Yeah.
know, right? I mean,
Indeed.
that it might not be the whole classroom, but three is a large number where you can have a lot of, things go wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the number really is much, much bigger than people
Bigger
realize.
than people think, because you're counting. You're talking about kinship. You're talking about
Yes. Yep.
informal arrangements. You took, as well as
Informal. Yes.
adopted
Yeah.
kids and foster kids. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if we could even take a look at, the number of kids who've experienced divorce, relational loss, displacement from home, alienation from a parent, that can all be experienced by those kids too. So what we're talking about really has such a much wider application. You can look at a newcomer's experience, kids who might live in immigrant families, or even a military family where you have a lot of moving around and losses, that we call them, disenfranchised grief and ambiguous loss, where, there's no funeral or memorial to commemorate any of this. And the kids expected to go on and live their life carrying what we call an
Yeah.
invisible backpack.
Yeah.
Um, and so, our job really is to unpack that backpack and to help people know what foster and adoptive kids go through.
Yeah. One of the most significant interviews that I've had on the show was also, like yourself, an adoptive mom, and she's an adoption professional too. She runs an agency in Texas. She's called Holly Ann Petrie. Addie's Hope is called the agency. Uh, she said to me, "Look, Simon, this is about raising adopted kids. Is about unpacking our own emotional baggage as adoptive parents, right? As
Yes.
adoptive parents. So this, if we want our kids to thrive, then we need to be doing this growth work ourselves. So what? So we're talking backpacks, right?
Yeah.
We call them
Mhm.
rucksacks in the UK, but it's the same thing,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Okay. I love it.
And I think that's from the German actually. Ruck
Rucksack. I love that.
is German for back, yeah,
Hmm.
backpack. So what does that mean for you? And I'm asking from a kind of like a personal perspective, Laura,
Hmm.
rather than the kind of the systematic stuff or systemic stuff that we've been talking about so far. What does that mean for you as an adoptive mum, perhaps more than as an adoption professional?
Yeah, and I love that it's, really about the parents unpacking, because it's so true. You have to do your own work, right? You have to look at the way your family, itself, how you relate. We had it's somewhat of a blessing sometimes to have bio kids first, because you've kind of had the experience of raising children, but that can be a very big detriment because it's not the same. And we bring, traditional parenting techniques and traditional, consequences for behaviors and things that is not the right way for kids who've had experienced trauma. And we don't automatically know that. And so, really, for me personally, it's this empathy growth. It's this idea that, okay, for these kids, they need something different. and how can we go about doing that? Um, and can be difficult when you do worry about the future, right? Like you want them to be able to go to school and get a job and all of that. But what we don't, we it's not as easy for these kids, and we also have to give them more time. So it's all those kinds of things that you have to really unpack the way really you parented before and re-examine everything and accommodate. And it makes I tell everyone, this is not the journey that I feel like the culture makes it out to be, right? Like, oh, adoption is such a wonderful thing. And once that child's in your home, all they need is love. Let's put a big bow on it and everybody go forward. That's just not what it is. And we all have a lot of learning to do for any of us who interact with the kids.
Yeah. I bristle slightly with the love isn't enough thing. Just because I agree, but let's not dismiss such an important thing, right? It is
Right.
all about love. Sorry, I'm not.
No,
Yeah,
you know what? You're right. I mean, there's a nuance, but
there's a yeah,
it's love. It's love that's willing, love meaning like you're willing to learn and grow,
yeah,
right? Because that's what you do. If you love someone, you're willing to change or
yeah,
learn and grow. And so that learning and growth, though, keeps going. We often say, so often, like when you work in foster care systems, the idea is let's get this child a permanent home, either a permanent guardianship or a permanent adoptive family. But the problem is it doesn't end with permanency. You still have a whole lot to go through and to do to foster healing. So yeah, it is. You're right. There's a
yeah.
nuance there for
Sorry, I
sure.
hope that didn't come across as critical. It's just
No,
I
I
hear it quite a
100%.
lot.
Yeah.
I hear it quite a lot, and my reaction is, well, no, it's not enough, but it's a really good place to start. And
Yeah.
let's not let's that I feel like it. If I was an adopted parent, I would feel it a little bit dismissive. So anyway, I didn't cause
Yeah.
offense, so that's good. Um, what I did love was this word, phrase, empathy growth. So,
Mhm.
what do you feel are the drivers or the perhaps the enablers of your own empathy growth?
Uh, it was really just feeling the own heartbreak of my child, like not understanding the why behind, struggle, right? Here we are, really loving parents trying to do our best, and it wasn't working, right? So that heartbreak and that, um, just trying to figure it out, and really the heartbreak of reaching out to others and it not working, like understanding that, wow, we have this whole gap of knowledge here, and no one really knows what to do. I mean, until you start getting into the weeds and searching on your own and finding, the information out there by the Center for Adoption, Support, and Education, or at the time the Children's Bureau, through our government, they have a Children's Bureau, and they had lots of information, and working side by side with Case. And, you realize, oh my gosh, like that is not what we were taught at the beginning, or if maybe what we were taught at the beginning was all they knew at the time, but nobody knocks on your
Mm,
door 20 or 15 years later and says, hey, did you know that now they know this? Or
mm,
did you know that this could really be helpful? Like there's just not that ability. So yeah, I mean, I always say my passion is only surpassed by the heartbreak that I felt.
yeah. Can you remember some key moments around that heartbreaking open for you?
You know, I mm, I don't like to put my kids' stories
Of
out
course,
there,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But I can tell you what I felt. It was
Yes,
really
that's what I'm
having,
interested. I'm
yes,
interested in
yes,
your thoughts, not your. Sorry, should have made that
yeah.
clear. I'm not
Yeah,
interested
no.
in your
So,
kid's
well,
stories.
I'm even trying to unpack it myself, because I do try to be very careful. But I remember that just feeling this deep, deep distress. I could see my daughter struggling. The school was clearly blaming me for the struggle, and not even knowing what my daughter went through before, right? I think the big breakdown always is we see kids go into their teenage years, and they're, smart and they're funny and they're articulate and they're all those things. And then we almost discount what they've gone through before or don't even understand that that should be part of the context. And I remember reaching out to the school so many times, and even our outside providers, and saying, "Do you think adoption could be part of this? Do you think?" And they would be like, "No, no, no. They've been in your house for so many years, and you guys are loving parents, and it's all good." And it just wasn't. And we could see it, we could feel it and know it. And that just really, that whole time period, really helped us to want to go forward. We ended up hiring an education advocate, a lawyer, to help us figure out what was going on, what was happening, where was the breakdown. We were able to go through like the different codes in our state that govern social work in schools. And we were really able to see like, wow, there's some really big gaps here. And this is how it's impacting our own family. And it was truly devastating. And so we, were able to help our own child grow and get through that in our family. But then I had to really sit and think about it. Like, do I just let this go, knowing what I know and not do anything more? Or do I really try to say, hey, there's a lot of caring individuals in schools that could be such big allies for us. But the only way they can do it is if they know too, right? So that was a whole like years period of time. And I started reaching out to senators and legislators to say, hey, did you know that there's this gap? Do you understand what adopt and foster kids go through? And they really didn't. And they were eager to listen, which was great. So, that's then where we just grew into, I started doing the adoption support group, where we have families all over the Metroplex. And what was so interesting, Simon, is it didn't matter if we had a family who adopted from foster care, a family who had adopted from domestic, whether it was an international adoption, it didn't matter. We were all struggling with the school piece. And so, I kind of went to my families and said, look, let's fix this. Let's change this. So that really launched our nonprofit then too.
Yeah. It's a common story, isn't it? When we learn stuff, then our focus starts with ourselves and then moves out to tackling
Yeah.
bigger issues.
And it's not easy. Like, it's draining work, and uh, you're trying to fix something that people don't see, right? I mean, we're almost a little bit like, someone told me you're kind of like a prophet. And I said, yeah, I guess I could see that analogy. You are going out, you are saying this problem exists, this exists, and you don't know about it yet. But let's get you on board, right? And so you have to build, and it takes time to build champions, to change hearts and minds. But when you do, we have seen the power in that, and how kids can then, once they're understood, we change the way we deal with behaviors, right? We change the way we deal with emotions. We talk to parents all the time. Like when your kids are saying things or, shouting at you or calling you names, maybe don't take it personally. Like this is like literally trauma and sadness and pain coming out this way. And often the kids don't even remember that later on. And they certainly can't articulate the fact that the way they feel now might be in any way connected to what happened to them, before they had words to speak. So that is again why it's important for parents to keep learning and growing, and everyone around them to be that right support.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me really profoundly was I was at an adoption conference in London last summer, and it became clear to me that this issue that adoptive parents talk about all the time, which is their kids' behavior, and
Hmm.
early on in the piece, we don't understand the drivers of the behavior, and we can't cope with the behavior. And it struck me that the kids don't know what's going on either, right?
No.
So I didn't. Have you heard this phrase coming out of the fork? Have you heard that phrase?
No, but I love
Okay.
that.
Well, I, growing up, I wasn't aware of any adoption trauma, right? Until I hit
Yeah.
40. So I
Yeah.
hit 40 and I had this moment about the teddy bear, right? So that was my coming out of the fog moment, which was Jung says, until we make the subconscious conscious, it will rule our life and we will call it fate, right? Until
I love.
40, I had no idea. So
Hmm.
the so until at 39, I had no idea. At 19, I had no idea. At 9, I had no idea.
Right.
So the kids don't the kids, teens, adults, they don't have any idea about what's driving the behavior, and the parents don't have any idea about what's driving the behavior. So everybody's lost.
Yes.
Nobody's
Yes.
seeing
Everybody's lost. Hmm.
nobody's seeing the impact of the trauma. And I think the tricky thing, if I can just talk about from an adoptee's point of view, is because especially kids like me adopted as infants and babies. I was 5 weeks old, right? And I know in the States it often happens even younger than that, right? The parents are there at the birth these days for some of these open adoptions. Um, and and yet uh, we can't remember it. So our brains can make mountains out of molehills and molehills out of mountains, and we really don't know because we never saw the original hill in the first place. We had no measuring stick. We didn't know the
Yes.
height of the hill.
Yes. But your body remembers, and
Well,
that's
that's
where we
the body.
see.
Yeah, the body, as they say, the body keeps the score.
Yeah, and that's really why, we see the impact being like big behaviors, big emotions, because, you know, I I tell parents all the time, my job is to break your heart, to really understand what that child lost. So even, yeah, the magic formula is supposed to be adoption at birth, but that someone explained to me once that to a child who's adopted at birth, there's no difference to that child between adoption and kidnapping. Like they don't have the lens to understand like now they're safe. All they know is that they've been removed from the one safe person that they've been with for 9 months, and that there's bonding there in utero, the smell, the heartbeat, the hearing the mother's voice, and all of that's taken away. And then we expect, somehow adoption to be magical. And yeah, I mean, what you say is exactly right. Everybody's lost. And, what we need to understand is that what we're seeing later on is a child responding to the loss, responding to loss. It's grief. And, even as adults, like if we think of the way we respond to a death of a spouse or a death of a sibling or whatever, we can have profound grief. We can be irritable. It can go on for a long time. Why would we think that that wouldn't be the same for children? And you're right. It does take a lifetime of your own brain forming, of your own experiences and growth to be able to then come to understand it. Even, sometimes people will say, well, can't we just tell the child, like, here's the deal, this happened, and you've had trauma, and now, once you understand that, that's going to make everything better. Well, that's not really true either, because trauma is not healed by information. Trauma is healed by experience, by feeling safe, by feeling validated for what they feel like. And that moment when you take a child and put them with another family changes that child's brain immediately about how they feel about themselves, how they feel about others, how they feel about the world. There's a sense of loss. And so we really, I feel like our goal is to, help them just cope and understand. And as you said, love is so important from that aspect. We have to just love these kids all through even the difficult and challenging behaviors and emotions.
Yeah. I I do think the mountain and molehills thing is true though. I think we can make, because we don't know the size of the original peak, we don't know. And
Hmm.
and we'll have no idea really. Like you kind of have to get to the point where it's all right with not knowing,
Not
like
knowing.
not
Hmm.
knowing. And that was significant for me. And I think it's also significant with adopted parents that I speak to, because sometimes they'll say, well, it can disappear down a rabbit hole of trying to say, is this human or is this adoption? And that's not, you're never going to be able to answer the question. So
Mm-mm.
move on.
Right.
Yeah,
But
move on. Don't, because we
that's
all
right.
have we have a
And take it
tendency to
all
judge.
into account, right? Like we talk about seeing kids from a very holistic standpoint. Um, we worry sometimes when there's mental health screening in schools, because unless it's followed up with questions about, family structure, if that child has had any experiences of foster care or adoption, it'll be seen as a mental illness. It'll be seen as ADHD or, typical anxiety, when really what we're seeing is dysregulation from loss, from trauma. And the support is different, much different. You can put a child diagnosed with ADHD on medicine, and it might have some effect and take away, some of the symptoms. But if you're never getting at what the underlying loss is, what the underlying why is to that child's dysregulation, then you're not going to have long-term, as we said, thriving. And our
Yeah,
goal is really to get at a child thriving, and you really have to understand a full family story of a child. Children are not, yeah, they just deserve that whole complexity of who they are.
yeah. So we've used the thriving word quite a lot. You've used healing a couple of times. What does healing mean to you, Laura?
So,
Can I ask you about? Sorry,
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
can I ask you about your own take on your own healing? Right, to make it clear, I'm not talking about
Yeah.
your any of your
No, I
daughter's
love
healing.
it.
Yeah,
The healing for me would be definitely um, removing the shame and the blame from this experience. It was clear that, and look, the children don't know, you don't know. Like in these situations where you might have kids diagnosed with, they call it reactive attachment disorder here, or oppositional defiance disorder, and things like that. Those are directed towards the parent, because the new caregiver, the new parent is trying to give love. But once you understand that your child doesn't trust you, not because it's you, but because it's the experience, that is very healing, because you're like, okay, we need to just keep going the way we're going. We need to keep doing what we're doing. It's just going to take time. And it removes that personal piece of it. It helps you reframe the experience, being it's the trauma that hurt our relationship. and not anything necessarily personally. And same thing, I would think from adoptees' perspective, the problem isn't them either. You know, a lot of kids interpret this loss as being a problem with them, or there must have been something about me that, caused this. And it's not, and we need professionals and all of us to come together and team up against the trauma. It's not the child's fault. It's not the parent's fault. It's literally the experiences that happen before those children come into our homes.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down de-shaming uh,
Mhm.
to kind of sum up that bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of stigma. I mean, we find that that's actually a barrier for families to come forward and get help because everybody paints such a rosy picture in adoption culture, right? In movies and
Yeah.
in everything. And they're afraid, well, if I seek out help, somehow I must be failing, right?
Yeah.
Or, there's just a lot of stigma. Our families might do things a little different. Things might be different than how a typical family might do things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more complexity. There might be, birth parents involved or whatever, and that should all be okay. But yet, because we don't talk about adoption enough, because we don't really unpack the reality of it enough, it is a big problem, for us to fight against the culture and still say this is positive and worth it. I would never say, not to adopt. It has been the most beautiful, positive experience. And so important. And we do feel like, love means everything, and that is the goal. Um, but we also, on top of that, also just need the help and the right support and the right lens to be able to understand the situation.
Yeah. Think from you answered in that piece the question I was trying to ask a little bit earlier on that I didn't ask it quite in the right way. So I'm glad that uh, you touched on that point. It was the bit where you said that families sometimes don't come forward because there's a stigma with that.
Mhm.
They feel that it's something wrong that they're doing wrong, and they don't want to expose that wrongness to somebody else, right? They don't want to share
Mhm.
that. They don't want to sit anybody else to um, feel that wrongness. And as I reflect on that and the adoptee experience, I think about my own reading the uh, the Primal Wound book, which was the first. There was a relief.
Mhm.
This explains stuff, and
Mhm.
then on the back of that relief came, I'm stuck with this,
Mhm. Yeah.
and
They, mhm.
and then on the back of that, I'm not right. So for me, what this means is that we can look at healing on at two different levels. So on one level, perhaps psychological level, including the somatic stuff, right? Including the
Mhm.
somatic stuff, which I did about 18 months of somatic experiencing. We can say that we'll be on that level, we'll be healing forever. And at a deeper, more profound level, we are always whole, and we were always whole. And that for me is the difference that makes the difference is seeing that wholeness
Mhm.
underneath our psychology, underneath our trauma.
Yeah. Really, I mean, we should marvel at you. We should marvel at these kids that have lived through so much and are where they are. I mean, in any form, like you said, they're whole exactly as the way they are. The Primal Wound can be a really tough book to read. I know a lot of adoptive parents just don't even want to, they hear about it and don't want to go down that road because it's heavy. I mean, like you said, you get done with it and you're like, oh my gosh, like no one's talking about this stuff, right? Um, but then, as you said, to really sit with that and understand that, wow, again, my feeling coming away from all of this is these kids are amazing. They are survivors. They are doing what it takes to survive. And a lot of what we see, as far as when we go back to like that discussion on emotions and behaviors, those are protective behaviors. And they, of course, they're going to have those behaviors. Like I feel like when you really understand the depth of it, you say, of course. Of course. I mean, why wouldn't they feel that way? So yeah, our job really is to grow and to nurture and to just love them until, we can get them to a place, like you said. I mean, you said 18 months of somatic work. You look at kids, they're in school, they're doing activities. They're not focusing on, gee, what do I need to do for grief support or to
Yeah,
heal? So, yeah, there's a lot, that I feel like if parents knew about, like, you know, we look at after school activities, put your kids in yoga, have them do Pilates, have them do breath work, be working with people on that level. I think a lot of, well, typical mental health support here would be talk therapy, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, individual sessions, talk one-on-one with the child. That's not what works for our kids. It's the somatic piece, it's the family systems piece. And again, not to say that it's the family or the parent or caregiver's fault, but the parent or caregiver can do things and make changes to help facilitate that child's healing. They can, change the way they discipline, change the way they talk, maybe come up with some different routines, and maybe not expect so much or expect the same things that you would if you had a child who was just, came to you in the typical way and was born biological. That maybe these kids need different types of after school activities, after school experiences, and things that we can focus on that might be a little different.
yeah.
Mhm.
So we're coming up on time here. I want to finish with two things,
Okay.
uh, really. The first thing is to reinforce what you just said, and it's probably the top two things that I have learned from from doing the podcast. Now, number one, I've talked about before. It's the the truth from Holly Ann Petrie, adoptive mum, adoption professional. Raising kids isn't about fixing them. It's about unpacking our own emotional baggage as adoptive parents. So
Hmm.
that's number one. And number two is we're all whole underneath our trauma. One of the
Hmm.
reasons that we don't need fixing, none of us need fixing. I mean, by none of us, I don't mean us adoptees, I mean human beings. None of us need fixing because we're not broken. We're complete, intact
Hmm.
underneath our trauma. Our trauma doesn't define us. It doesn't
Correct.
mean that
Yes.
we are broken. So the biggest thing I think that we can all do is see our wholeness.
Hmm. And wholeness is complex, right? I mean, we have to.
I'm going to disagree there, Laura.
Oh,
We're going to
okay.
Wholeness is complex. Sorry, maybe we could do another one in 6 months' time or later on because I don't want to. I don't
Well,
know.
wholeness is okay. I'll say it this way for other people to understand our wholeness, right? They want to focus on the trauma instead of focusing on, no, let's look at what this child lived through.
Okay, so here's my take on wholeness. Right, rock paper scissors. Yeah, the kids game. Rock paper
Hmm.
scissors. This
Hmm.
is my metaphor for wholeness. So the rock is who we are. Uh, Nancy Verrier would say that trauma is the scissors. That's what
Hmm.
she would say. So she would say that the scissors can cut the rock, but we all know that that's not true.
Hmm.
So uh, scissors, cut, wound, all these things, they're not they're not the right they're not an accurate metaphor for trauma. A far more accurate metaphor for trauma for me is the paper because wraps the paper wraps the rock. The paper beats the rock until we unfold the paper and reveal the wholeness underneath the trauma. So
Yeah.
that's what I
No, I
mean
love that. Yeah.
by trauma, and I've made that as simple as as I can, but not simplistic. It is the truth. Our our trauma hides us, it doesn't harm us.
Yes. Well, and we use the term invisible backpack going into schools because it's what isn't seen, right? And we want everyone to understand that because you're right. At the end of the day, these are beautiful, amazing kids that are perfectly made. And yeah, we want that strength to be able to shine through.
Yeah. It's the backpack is invisible because the kid can't see it, and
No.
neither can the teacher,
Hmm.
and neither can the parent
And now they
initially
can pay.
until they can. None of it. That term coming out of the fog, which I've used for
Hmm.
adoptees becoming aware of their trauma. I've also heard that. I've heard that used by adoptive parents coming from from their perspective. That's them becoming aware of the trauma that they hadn't previously seen.
Yes. Hmm. Hmm.
So, a fantastic conversation. Is there anything that I've not asked you about that you'd like to share, Laura?
Wow, we've hit on so much. I love how you said too that nobody can see that backpack, right? No one. And we there's so much to learn. This is such a complex you know, journey. And I think that once we start to put some, more supports out there that we're learning so much, and I feel like there's so much hope for the future, but it's really going to take all of us, you know, people like you having these podcasts and having these conversations so that people can start thinking about it and thinking about how it's, not as simple as the media has made it out to be so often.
Yeah, and people like you to come on the podcast, right?
Yes, it's been great conversation. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I've loved it too. Thank you, listeners, and we'll speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.